All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take roll?
Commissioner Phillips. Commissioner Sobek. Here. Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Vice Chair Metalko.
Here.
Chair Leesmeyer.
Here. Good evening, everyone. We all please rise for the flag salute. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any agenda modifications tonight?
No, sir.
All right.
Appreciate it.
I see no presentations listed. That has not changed?
No, sir.
Okay. Are there any speaker slips for public comment, items not on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Katie Manier.
Katie, come on up.
There's so much to talk about in this town. I'm going to be off track with the sledge issue tonight, though. I want to know if any of you are aware that the state has released over 700 convicts, and there are many more to follow. Some cities are rezoning residential neighborhoods to accommodate these criminals. I want to know if our city is one of them. We've backdoor deals being made all the time, and you, the planning commissioners, are not in on these deals. And I think somebody needs to be monitoring if this is going to happen. I want to know if there have been any permits or applications for these mini prisons without security to pop up in the city. At least in prison, they have guards and are monitored 24/7. They will have no jobs or means to acquire jobs, so every citizen will be at their mercy for robbery and crimes. Ann Piker recently stated at a city council meeting that crime is up 200% in this city per a police report. And we don't have enough police on the ground as it is. The promise of more police is a campaign ploy by our mayor, I believe. I'll believe that when I see it, when I actually see the boots hit the ground and we have more officers. If these prisoners are allowed to live in our neighborhoods, it will allow law enforcement to make routine visits, putting all citizens in jeopardy of having them enter the wrong property like they did to ex-planning commissioner Mark Miller. They destroyed his home when they were actually looking for a man and his son living on the property in a trailer, a great distance from his own home. They found nothing in his home, yet trashed it, leaving broken windows, and they trashed a motorhome that belonged to his parents. I don't want to live in a neighborhood with many prisons around me and lowering my property value. These prisoners are being dumped with no income, no way to have income. They'll be begging on our streets. We already have enough people panhandling and begging on the freeway off-ramps and the street corners now. And at least in prison, they have guards, and this city doesn't even have enough law enforcement to take care of the crimes that are going on now. So I would like to know, is our city rezoning neighborhoods to allow? We have 5 and 6 bedroom homes and some with 7 even. That's a lot of bodies they can put in there to rent out or to wherever the money's coming from, putting everybody at risk. I think this needs to be investigated.
Grant
Ms.
Yoders. Sorry.
Excuse me, Ms. Benier?
Yes.
Do you have any information to substantiate their claim that there's other cities that are rezoning their properties to house inmates?
That was on the news.
Okay. I just want to check that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. Grant?
Grant
You're up.
Yoders.
Yeah, good evening, Grant Yoders, Community of Sun City. I just want to briefly address this ongoing debate regarding the shipping containers. You know, we've been dealing with this for over 3 years, and it's time that the city council really gets off the pot here and does their job and takes some action on this ordinance. The last recommendation that you presented to the city council at two meetings ago, and of course they put it on a continuance till the 16th of July. I thought your recommendation was reasonable, even though I did agree with Mr. Phillips and Mr. Metelko in regards to their stance on the containers, but at least it was something that went forward, and I thought that the city council should be taking some action. But it's very obvious that if there's not a provision in that ordinance that completely eliminates containers altogether, Scott Mann John Denver, and now Greg August, they're not going to approve it. So, you know, if it ever gets to the point where they vote against the containers, I don't have a problem with the citizens that are being affected of filing a lawsuit against the city. And that way they can put the council members on report who are responsible for that action. Thank you.
Sir?
Just as a point of information, that item was continued to a special meeting of July 30th, not the 16th.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
No, sir, not on this item.
What it says on the special notice I got in the mail last Monday, July 16th.
Do you have a copy of it?
We will check that out, but the
Okay.
council has set a meeting for July 30th to deal with that in Hillside.
Okay.
I have a
Can we,
question,
can we make,
staff.
can we just make sure that the documentation that was sent out to the public is correct?
Question, staff, regarding that. There was an article in the paper quoting different people, and some said there were 400, some said there were 800, some there were thousands of these containers. Did the city ever get any kind of a reasonable count on these? Actual count that we can rely upon?
I don't know that.
Councilman Furman had a count. I think he said it was like 870 in the whole.
According to John Denver, there's 254.
There's more than that.
Okay. Jen,
I
any more?
haven't been out counting them.
No
I'm
further
just saying
speakers
what
on this
John Denver
item.
said.
Okay.
I have a question of staff as far as what Katie was talking about. Has there been any requests or communication with law enforcement on how many of these people were released in Menifee? And are some of these houses being turned into halfway houses, you know, without proper zoning? What, have permits or applications been, like she's asking, has anyone contacted the city and to put some of these people where they are? Because I would imagine that they're using them like as halfway houses. Is there any information that we can have, or you guys can maybe contact the sheriff and find out and give a report back to us and a report to the council? Because it almost sounds like this may come up at their meeting also.
I'm unaware of what she's referring to. No one has contacted myself, and no one has contacted administration, who then may have relayed it to me. I don't know if they were or weren't contacted, so they didn't relate it to me. We currently have and will have, because it's mandated under state law, certain provisions that allow for certain facilities to be within communities. We also have laws that specify that if you have a facility that is 6 or fewer individuals, it must be treated as a single-family home. There are factions in California that are attempting to get that changed, but at the moment, if a facility is 6 individuals or fewer, it must be considered a single-family residence. In addition, if these individuals are not on parole, if they are simply released from prison, they can collectively live together in virtually any number that does not violate health and safety codes without the city having a restriction on that.
Perhaps there would be a consensus of the commission to bring this back at a later discussion, to where maybe you can dig it up.
We'll investigate and find out what she's referring to as far as what prisoners are being released and under what circumstances.
Okay.
But the city is not proposing to change anything in that aspect from what you currently have.
I'm also specifically curious about the claim made of rezoning residential areas to house inmates, so if that's something we can dig into, I'd
I have a question. Does this,
Commissioner appreciate it.
has the city identified any of these houses currently in existence in the city of boundaries of Menifee?
In the year I've been here, I'm unaware of any.
There are currently halfway houses in the city of.
That's not my answer to the question. I am not aware of the city doing any kind of research to find out how many there are.
In agendizing this, if we could research.
We can bring back some.
I'm not sure that we'd be able to find all of those. We can
Whatever you
research,
have.
we can
Whatever
research
you
what,
have. You
we
can-
can research what we do know of.
That would be great.
Thank you. Are there any speakers, Jen?
No further speakers on this item.
Thank you. That'll move us to item 7.1, the approval of our minutes from May 27th. Is quite a while back, so I don't think anybody has any problems with that. If we don't, can to entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion, we approve the,
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We have nothing on our consent calendar, which brings us to item 9.1, the public hearing for the CUP 2014-116, the microbrewery located here on New Hub. Mr. Leclerc, do you have a staff report for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Associate Planner Fowler will give you a staff report in a moment, but I'd like to emphasize for you that what you are being considered to review tonight is not the brewery activity in and of itself. That is permitted in this specific zone by right. It is simply allowed. In addition, the building itself is not subject to your review because that was approved under the county, under a plot plan, and was built according to that approval. In addition, ABC does not require a letter of public convenience and necessity for this operation, even though our census tract is at its limit for retail sales of alcohol. Because of the nature of this land use activity, a brewery that has associated retail sales. So those three issues are not before you tonight. What is before you tonight is my interpretation that the allowed brewery would also be allowed to have, quote, incidental, end quote, retail sales and a tasting room. Your decision is whether or not you agree with that interpretation as to whether 10% or any percent of those two activities is acceptable at this particular location. That is the issue before you tonight. With that, Mr. Fowler will have his presentation.
So this is Ryan Fowler, Associate Planner, and I'm here to present Minor Conditional Use Permit 2014-116. It's the Mason Jar Brewing Company. It's for, as the director said, the tasting room and sale of beer for off-premises consumption. The location of this is 2 driveways over. It's just beyond the USPS postal annex in a multi-tenant shell industrial building, just 2 driveways over in this direction. It's currently, the parcel is currently zoned a new hub specific plan. It's within planning area 4, which is light industrial. To the north and south of this parcel is the same planning area, light industrial. To the east, within the middle portion of that specific plan area is planning area 2, which is for office. To the west is the Paloma Wash, which is zoned watercourse, watershed, and conservation area. And it's also designated open space recreation for the Paloma Wash. All the other uses to the north, east, west can mimic the specific plan area zoning. The parcel is was built as a multi-tenant shell industrial building. Within that building currently, there are existing uses. For instance, there's the martial arts studio, there's dance studio, there's P&T, auto, and vacant suites within there. To the north is the USPS post office annex, as I said. To the south is an industrial building which contains the City of Menifee maintenance facility and Calvary Hills Church, which I understand meets only on Sunday mornings. To the east is vacant land. To the west is Paloma Wash. The project under consideration today proposes to establish a 612 square foot microbrewery tasting room within a 3,077 square foot suite of that existing multi-tenant warehouse and office shell building. The tasting room will occupy approximately 20% of the total square footage of this particular suite, and the tasting room will also sell growlers, which is to-go containers and jugs with sealable caps that are typically half-gallon in size. And this is for off-premise consumption. And just to reiterate, that's for beer only, not wine or hard alcohol. This is a exhibit of the proposed floor plan. The sampling room there you see on your left contains the tables and the bar to the right is the brewery operation. There's also a portion, a mezzanine level above the sampling room that essentially follows the boundaries of the sampling room. It's on the second story.
What will the mezzanine be used for?
Storage. As background, plot plan number 19590 was approved at the County of Riverside in 2005, and it approved that multi-tenant industrial shell building in the parking lot you see out there. It was a 21,930 square foot shell building. At the time it was approved, it was just a shell building. There was no tenants identified. It was just purposed for warehousing and offices. The proposed use is intended principally to be a small-scale microbrewery operation dedicated to the production of specialty beers. As the director stated, the tasting room, in his expert opinion, the tasting room, if it comprised less than or equal to 10% of the floor area or revenue for the entire project, the tasting room would have been considered allowable use as part of the brewery as a use permitted by right. That was 10% or under. The tasting room is, however, 20%, approximately 20% of the total square footage. So it is above that 10%, which would have been allowed by right. Now, the sale of growlers for off-premises consumption is also intended to be a small incidental part of the proposed microbrewery production and tasting room operations. Just based on other microbreweries in the region, an estimate of less than or equal to 5% of overall sales was given for the off-premise sales of the growlers. That was their estimation. As the potential exists for the tasting room to exceed this incidental 10% limit, the brewery's associated uses, i.e. the tasting room and retail sales, trigger the need for the discretionary review, and that's why it's here before the Planning Commission for your consideration. The director has determined that both the sale of alcohol and the tasting room require a minor CUP, which must be considered and acted upon by the Planning Commission. So just to briefly go over this point, because the director alluded to it, this requires a Type 23 license, which is for small beer manufacturers and brew pub or microbreweries. It is not the typical Type 20 or Type 21, which would be required for a liquor store or a mini mart or a convenience store. In those cases, if there was an overconcentration of those liquor licenses within a particular census tract, they would have to make a finding of public necessity and convenience. In this case, because it's the Type 23 for the small beer manufacturer, it doesn't require the public necessity and convenience, regardless of the fact of whether there's an overconcentration of licenses. And that's pursuant to ABC and the California Business and Professions Code. Staff's recommendation at this time is to adopt resolution number PC 14-179, approving conditional use permit number 2014-116 to allow for a microbrewery tasting room with a sale of beer for off-premise consumption. Based upon the findings and conclusions incorporated in the staff report, this concludes staff's presentation.
Are there any questions of staff on the staff report?
Yeah, I have a question. If the off-site consumption, those glass things are gonna sell is less than 5%, do they sell wholesale to retail outlets? Is that what they're doing then? Where's the rest of sales coming from?
Yes, that is their principal activity, is the wholesale to local restaurants and some, basically local restaurants, bars, and so forth.
So then the tasting room or bar, that's not actually like a bar, it's just sort of like you come in and taste, it's not a bar where people come after work and start sitting around just drinking, right?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It's like sampling?
Yes,
Sampling
strictly
product?
sampling.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, hours of operation, there were in the paperwork, there was a limitation on noise,
But no.
but it didn't say anything about hours of operation.
Yes.
Correct. The staff report does not establish at this point a condition that would limit the hours of operation of the tasting room or the retail sales. There are state standards, but those are till 2 o'clock and 6 to 2 or something like that. If the commission feels it appropriate, you can apply that as an additional condition of approval.
Okay.
Yeah, also in the staff report, I saw mentioned that there were 72 parking places for that locale. And when I visited it this morning, I counted 52. So I just was a little bit
That could
concerned
have,
in
that,
parking.
you are correct that it is 52. We did a calculation as well and looked at what was required originally with the plot plan approval that the county did. You're correct, there was 52. I don't know, maybe it was a typo with the 72.
Okay.
But they were required for, I believe, 24, 25 less than what they provided, which was the 52.
And also, a brewery is only to sell their own beer, is that correct? And not under this type 23, their own label, and not bring in other beers to be sold, brands, is that?
That's the intent of the
Okay.
tasting room, yes.
And then no spirits and no wine?
Correct.
Okay, I was looking over the CUP that was recommended, number 21, says employees selling beer, wine, or distilled spirits between the hours of 10 PM and 2 AM shall be at least 21 years of age. Do we want that even open at that time?
These conditions, as I'm reading them, because you had a question before about the wine and distilled spirits, these appear to be repeats of ABC restrictions. And if you would like different hours, again, you can add that as a condition of approval.
Is this something we can hear, is the owner here, and are they gonna make a report?
The
or
applicant
share-
is here, and
applicant?
they can
Okay.
address your
I'll wait
concern.
till we hear from the applicant and from any of the community members that are here.
There's
Thank
page 2 of 6 of the conditions of use. There's a small typo. It's my anal retentive nature. So top of it says number 5, City of Menifee. The city would identify and fund mitigation measures CEQA through development. There's just a no typo there. So see that? First paragraph, page 2 of 6. It's not going to change the world, but
Oh.
As a matter of fact, there's another typo on the engineering drawing. They misspelled fermenters.
Okay.
I noticed that right off the bat. They have fermenters down there instead of fermenters. So
it's free beer then.
Okay, any other questions of staff on the staff report? All right, we'll open the public hearing at, what is it? Sir?
No.
Good. We'll open the public hearing at 7:25. Madam Clerk, this was legally published,
Yes, sir.
and have we received any additional correspondence regarding the item?
No, sir.
Is the applicant here? You guys wish to speak? Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Good evening. I want to thank right away, well, I'm Robert Carter, and this is my wife, Grace. We want to thank Ryan Fowler for the job he did on the staff report, and the commission as well for allowing this tonight, and our supporters that are here. And basically, we're just going to be a really small outfit, 5 to 7 barrels, which, you know, it's 155 gallons per brew. And it's specialty beers, and to address, it is just ours. We don't allow anybody else to come in and put their beers, their taps. That's for, you know, Beer Hunter and BJ's to do that kind of stuff. Another question I'd like to address of yours was our hours. We're going to stay with all the rest of the breweries within Temecula and Murrieta. Their hours are normally anywhere from 3, maybe 4 o'clock to 8. That's it. They're closed at 8 o'clock. Last call's at 7:40, and 8 is the end of the show. So there will be no open till 2 o'clock in the morning, and there will be no wine, no spirits whatsoever.
That's for the tasting room.
Yeah, for the tasting room.
But the manufacturing will be most likely 10.
Oh yeah, when we're manufacturing, it'll be the almost like basic work hours, 9, 10 in the morning. But the tasting room is still closed, and we'll be in the back brewing or transferring the fermenters or transferring the kegs, receiving shipments, but it will not be open to the public at that time. Not until 3 or 4, whichever time we decide to go ahead, will be our hours. But for sure, 8 o'clock is when it's over.
Okay.
That's pretty much all
Questions?
we have.
Are there any questions of the applicant?
Yes, I have one question. In brewing your products,
Mhm.
you're gonna end up generating organic waste.
Yes, sir.
And do you have plans, I know that that will come under Department of Environmental Health, but I'm wondering if you have plans on how you're going to manage your waste streams?
Yeah, we're gonna put that in play with, whether it be waste management, CR&R, and then there's another thing that's bouncing around, higher levels than us, for breweries to allow local agriculture, such as, dairies, chicken farms, to have their waste, because it's just water that's mixed with grain, basically. There's no chemicals, nothing to it. And there's a little battle going on right now, if they should allow that, because right now people are doing it. Some breweries throughout the nation are donating it to to dairies and to chicken farms, and so far.
Pigs like it too.
Yeah, and pigs like it too, exactly, and goats. And there hasn't been any findings saying that it's hurting, livestock and agriculture. So that's our plan, is we'll go through CR&R first, waste management, and if it is permitted, we'll let the local dairies, and they can have first dibs. They can come get it for free food for their livestock.
Okay, now how are you gonna deal with the filter cakes? Or how are you gonna filter your product?
Our plan right now is not to filter.
You're not gonna filter?
No,
Okay.
no, not at this point.
And the other problem I had was the organic waste that's still in the liquid, your waste stream. Has Eastern Municipal or any of the sewage treatment plants taken a look at your plans, preliminary plans? Because that's a lot of organic material that you're gonna be putting
We were
in
told
there.
to hold off on that until after tonight. Once we get approval, that's our next step, is to go to Eastern and talk to them, because we will have a floor drain in place, just like all other breweries
Right.
are required. And we're gonna talk to them and see what is required, and then we'll act upon that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sobek, you had a question?
Yes. When you mentioned your hours of 3 to 8, what were your days that you would, is this gonna be something like 7 days a week?
No,
or-
ma'am, we're planning on being closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Okay. And, can I ask you why you picked this area that was near Diana's dance studio and little karate place where it's a family-friendly environment?
You wanna take that one?
Well, we don't feel that the microbrewery and the tasting room is not family-friendly, as well as this is the only area that Menifee has zoned for us to be, unfortunately, for industrial.
And-
We've tried other sites that were deemed for retail, and there was one other site that was gonna require us to have a restaurant attached, and we're not in the food business.
Correct.
I don't seek to be a cook or have any kind of food management on my plate. And we were told that this building over here will be suitable for us, but at the time it was taken by, I think it was Elevate Fitness. And we just happened to drive by one day and we saw that it was finally vacant. And we came here immediately and we went to Amber Management, and that's when we set this in motion.
Do you have an idea of like how many clients you would be having coming through? I mean, do you have any experience with tasting rooms?
It
How
could
much
be
traffic that would
What you see
be?
here, it could be 2 people because they don't want to come in that day. It could be packed. We've been to some breweries where there's 2 people in there, and we've been to some breweries that their tasting room has, maybe 30 people in it.
But that's why our tasting room is small. We don't want to have a pub. We don't want to have a bar. It's a family environment. It's the mason jar. It's a country environment. It's country chic. It's come back, taste, buy fresh, buy local, and then go home and enjoy it with your friends and family. That's the kind of premise that we're going for, not a bar.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any speaker slips for public testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's hear that.
Bradford Miller.
Good evening, Commissioners. It's Beaufort, B-E-A-U-F-O-R-D. The first time we had notice of this operation was through the notice for this hearing, and we live just on the other side of the creek, Wrestler's Ranch. And by way of a little history for the Commissioners, when the specific plan was adopted, the hub specific plan, 20-some odd years ago, it's been a while, one of the major concerns for the residents over there with regards to the development of this property, the hub, was noise and smells. And so adjustments were made, and it was all, everyone was happy with the adjustments made to the specific plan. So when we got the notice and saw it was going to be a brewery, and I have no opposition to a brewery in the city, quite frankly, but we also know that the breweries generate certain smells, the hops and whatnot. And that was what brought my wife, who's in the audience, us out tonight to hear about the project. And that's our primary concern. Now, I understand from staff's report that the brewery operation isn't necessarily before you in terms of the permit variance that you're reviewing tonight. But that is a concern, and I hope it's something that the Commission keeps in mind in terms of its conditions in reviewing the project. My understanding from the applicant is this is a small operation and maybe it's not an issue, but I hope it's something that the city's mindful of, and certainly not something that will give cause for the neighbors, the residents across the creek that will have to come forward and complain about to you in the future. So hopefully that'll get your attention. Thank you. Right.
Marcia Miller. Okay. No further speakers.
Okay. All right, we'll close the public hearing at 7:35. Mr. Leclerc, you have something to add?
Just a point of information, the air pollution laws that are now in effect in California are such that if this brewery were to generate any kind of odors, they would have to be addressed. I'll give you an example. Bakeries nowadays, because of air pollution requirements and limitations, bakeries are so limited that you can't even smell bread baking on the outside of them. So the same kind of situation would apply to a brewery. If they were to generate a smell, that would be inconsistent with the approval that you are granting tonight, if you grant it and they go into operation. And under that basis, it could be brought back to the Commission for violation of the approval, and at that point in time, if found appropriate, could be revoked.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so again, the public hearing is closed at 7:35. We'll bring it behind the dais for discussion. Are there any concerns, questions, comments regarding the item? If not, we can entertain a motion.
I have a couple.
Okay.
Well, I'm pro-business, and I like small businesses the way this city's gonna grow. I am very concerned about the tasting room aspect with the karate and the dance studio. I leave here at nights and see little tutus and tights and little boys in their, whatever those things are they use in karate. Gis. And the hours this would be operating is right when they're going, coming, and from. That kind of concerns me. And being the proximity to the church, even though it is only on Sundays mornings. I think this would be an appropriate and useful business, maybe in another location. And it's difficult for you right now because we don't have enough commercial and industrial space. But if you talk to the economic development director and maybe planning director, there are several commercial retail projects online going to be pulling grading permits anytime. So there will be additional space available. I just question whether this is appropriate for this location. It concerns me. The other thing is, even though it is technically and legally allowed, but there's a part that's, it's called off-site consumption. It is a tasting room, and which is on-site consumption. So there's an interpretation of the code, because a tasting room is not necessarily in the code. This is an interpretation that's allowed, and I would question whether it is a correct interpretation of the code. It's the on-site drinking, the location, and the people that are, the other tenants that are in here, which I don't think this would be a appropriate mix at this time, another location, and the parking. So those are my concerns. I want to encourage business, just like some of the other, we've had some other applicants in the hub here, we've said, we love your business, but you might want to put it in a different location. That's my concern.
Have we had any letters or anything from Diana's Dance Company or any of the tenants in the building that have been notified on the project?
No letter, sir.
Okay.
I'm aware that Diana's Dance Studio is on summer break, and they will not return until August. So I'm not sure if they've even seen the notice.
Okay. Any other concerns, Chris?
Let me just look through my notes really quick here. I think even with the hours operation, if it was approved, I'd want to put hours operation on it, but I'm really leaning towards, it really is appropriate in another location, like across where, another place where there's restaurants and things where alcohol is served. I would be more comfortable. I lived in Temecula for 15 years, and there's a lot of wineries, and they have the tasting rooms, and people go to the tasting rooms, and even now with the limitations they have, you see them kind of swaying when they leave. That makes me concerned with having it here. I guess now all the other questions have been answered. We're getting a lot of alcohol type places in our city, which doesn't make me comfortable as well. So we need to put them in the right places so everyone's safe and comfortable. That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Sobek.
I kind of had some of the same thoughts that Chris had. I am concerned a little bit about about the parking in that area, and then it being close to City Hall, as well as in the dance studio and the karate. Maybe if it didn't have a tasting room and it was just a brewery, then maybe that would be a doable thing right now, until Commerce Point comes in, or one of our other facilities that are coming forward. But I think we have to take into consideration the facilities that are there and the health and safety and well-being. And so the interpretation, again, sorry, Charles, I quite don't agree with your interpretation. Thank you.
So then my question or comment would be, the only reason we're here is because of the tasting room, is that correct? Without the tasting room, this wouldn't even have been a hearing? It would have been approved?
My interpretation of the code is that the tasting room and retail sales above incidental requires this review. So as Commissioner Sobek just mentioned, she disagrees with that interpretation, and that 10% limit, because they want to go to 20, but that 10% limit can be another number as incidental, or can be 0, because the code is not clear and not specific in saying that either one of those two activities, retail sales or tasting room, is permitted. What is permitted is the brewery. And so even if you deny the conditional use permit tonight, they can still conduct the brewery operations. What they could not conduct would be the retail sales or tasting room aspect, up to and beyond 10%, unless you as a body tell me, interpret the code for me, that some other number beyond, less than 10% is, in your opinion, incidental.
So what you're saying is,
You made that clear.
I can restate it. You have
basically what you're saying
Okay.
is the only way to handle this is to stifle their growth by 10%. They cannot sell above 10% of their retail cannot be
You-
10% of
Or
their
have a
sales can't leave
closet
the
for a
building.
tasting room.
So we're saying, come to Menifee, but you can't sell more than 10%. Is
You
that what you're
can't,
saying?
you can't retail
Without a
sales.
without a conditional use permit.
Right. You're making two decisions. One, do you accept staff's interpretation that incidental and therefore allowed is up to 10%? And do you accept and approve the conditional use permit that, because they're asking for more than 10%, and that's where the CUP aspect comes in. So you could deny the CUP, but let stand staff's interpretation, my interpretation of incidental, which would allow them up to the 10%. Or you could say, no, that's a wrong interpretation.
Not only do we have to say we deny the CUP, but we need to also give direction whether that 10% is, we consider a proper interpretation. And,
You have that opportunity.
and
You
it's
don't
important
have-
to say this, we're not saying he can't do a business, we're just saying whether it has to have a CUP or not. The beer hunter has to have a CUP. Anyone serving alcohol has to have a CUP.
It's a different type of a use, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Mark, comments?
I'm clear now.
Earl?
I don't have any comments.
Okay. I'm all for this. I mean, this is exactly what, I mean, when you go to a brewery, sorry. When you go to a brewery like this, okay, I'm a beer drinker. When you go to a brewery like this, you want to be able to sample your product. You want to make sure you're getting something that's quality. You don't want to go in there and buy blind. You want to make sure, you want to make sure you purchase. It's just like buying a new car. You want to go get a test drive. It's the same kind of thing. You don't go to these kind of places to go get plastered. You go to other places, that serve for those types of purposes. This is clear cut to me. If anybody would care to make a decision on this, let me know. Otherwise, I'll do it myself.
I make a motion to deny based on the proximity to the children and already existing uses that are there, and encourage them to find another location. Not saying not do it, just find an appropriate location.
Okay. And you understand with your motion that you're basically telling them they cannot be in Menifee?
For a temporary period of time, as many other projects are coming online. We're not saying they can't be in Menifee, we're just saying you may have to wait a little bit. And that's
Okay.
not the first person we've said that.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
We need a clarification on the motion. Was the motion to deny the conditional use permit and interpret the code that incidental is not up to 10%?
We probably should discuss that. What's the commission's, that's a whole nother issue. Do you consider the 10% correct interpretation or not?
Well, in their own words, they mentioned that they don't expect more than 5%.
But wasn't the 10% the amount of floor space for the tasting room, not the sales?
It's the percentage of retail sales and the percentage of floor area.
Both.
Either 10% is the limitation.
And the floor area is 20.
If I could clear that up, 10% was a limitation on the floor area or revenue for the tasting room aspect. The 5% that we mentioned previously, that was for the growler sale, what they anticipate as a percentage of their total sales.
So
The retail sales aspect.
I have a question of the client, or the applicant. Could you function in a 10% floor area? I don't think you can. I don't think a tasting room can function at a 10%.
Ryan, would it be possible to tabulate what that percentage would be, excluding the foyer and the areas that would not be standing room for sampling? I mean, just looking at it, it's, if you were to just draw a line right across the front of the bar, it's.
On this floor plan, it's 550 square feet if you exclude the bathroom, and the total square footage of the building is what?
612?
612? No, the total square footage of the
Of the
suite.
entire building, 3,077.
So that would be
550
1/6
divided.
of the, so you're still talking 18%?
Yeah, it's nominal. It doesn't make any difference.
So when you ask whether we agree on this 10% thing, is that only has to do with things that are not specifically delineated in the code, correct?
Correct, and that interpretation, I've used that interpretation in other cities and in this city to determine what is incidental and not incidental. That's my particular threshold of comfort.
What's another example where this has come up and that you use that threshold? Can you think of one?
For example, when you have in 29 Palms, you could have a liquor store, but you were limited in how much floor area could sell
Spirits?
not spirits, but tobacco and tobacco-related products. And so that was limited to incidental, so less than 10 square feet, 10% of the floor area, or 10% of the retail sales. Tattoo facilities where they had various retail sales items, and they were limited in their 10% criteria as well. Where you would have a bookstore that would serve sandwiches and coffees and things of that sort. They were limited as incidental as well, things of that sort.
So it's a reasonable, proven percentage then?
In my opinion, yes. In 32 years, it hasn't been challenged once.
I'm okay with that interpretation as far as the 10%, as far as the 10% thing. I don't know if that's the council says. Commission.
Do you want to clarify your motion?
It would be to deny this specific resolution allowing the conditional use permit, but in supporting the 10% interpretation of the code.
I would second that.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Phillips? No. Commissioner Sobek?
Which way do I go?
If
You were the second, you would be a yes.
Okay, yes.
That's not necessarily correct.
Is
You
that-
can second a motion in order to initiate a vote.
If you say yes, you're approving denial. You're saying deny it.
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Vice Chair Metelko?
No.
Chair Leesmeyer?
No.
Motion fails.
Is there an alternate motion? I'll do it myself. I'll make a motion to approve permit number 2014-116, allowing the minor conditional use permit for the microbrewery.
I would suggest that you, in your motion, include modifications to the conditions of approval that limit the hours to 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. daily, that you modify condition number 14, as there's an error in that and it's not legal as written, to state at the last several words, Community Development Department staff and shall be subject to the approved conditions and limitations. This deals with transfer of ownership and correction of typos.
Is the applicant amenable to those conditions? Okay. With the amended conditions of approval as noted, I will recommend adoption of resolution PC 14-179, approving the minor conditional use permit 2014-116.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Phillips?
Aye.
Commissioner Sobek?
No.
Commissioner Thomas?
No.
Vice Chair Metelko?
Yes.
Chair Leesmeyer?
Yes. Okay. You're good. That'll move us to item 10.1, the development code chapters. Mr. Leclerc, do you have a report on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind you that in January of this year, you were provided with about 92 pages of, it was actually about 90 pages of the material that will hopefully eventually lead to a new development code. This would be the first several chapters of that new development code. I wanted to reiterate to you, because we are now entering a part of the year when it would be advantageous for you to become familiar with this material so that we could start reviewing it and forming recommendations that would be forwarded to the City Council. What I'm asking you to do, because the majority of this was chosen because of its rather boilerplate nature. A lot of the things in here are things that are generic and apply to 99% of the cities in California and are of minor concern for the commission. However, there are a variety of things, and I would suggest you read word for word everything in here. And we are asking that you do that and then raise the questions that you would have. And there are things, and I'll point them out in a moment, where you will be asked to make decisions on that will affect how the material is forwarded to the City Council. I'll give you an example. If you move, obviously, I want you to read the purpose and intent on page 2 so that you're clear as to what you're recommending that this council, this city eventually, through the City Council action, adopt. On page 5, it's the administrative responsibilities that goes through the different aspects of what the purpose of this chapter is, what the planning agency is, and so forth. And it reiterates the state code requirements. For example, on page 6 where it says Planning Commission, and it gives you the government code section that gives you the role and functions of the Planning Commission. And it's a reiteration of that so that you know that you are not to be reviewing issues like business license. You are not to be reviewing issues such as police codes and things of that sort. What you are limited to are issues that deal with the general plan and land use activities. Going on, there are things like on page 7, rules of interpretation, where the community development director gets to make interpretations of the code, and you can look at that and make sure that you're comfortable that those criteria for my interpretation are appropriate in your opinion, or whether you would like, instead of the community development director to have that interpretive power, that the commission have that power. That would be a choice that you would be recommending to the City Council. Again, I'm giving you a few examples through these pages to give you an idea of what it is that staff is looking for. Go to page 9, and on page 9, there's a section that says authority to enforce. You may want to have somebody else listed in that or taken out of the entities that have the authority to enforce the development code. Moving on again, these are just examples. Article 2, beginning on page 11, talks about land use and development procedures. So these are stock procedures that most communities use, but there are certain decisions that are made by certain entities, and you have the chance to review whether or not you agree with the suggestions of staff, that staff do it, or commission do it, or City Council do it, or some other entity such as the Technical Advisory Committee that is suggested within this. I also point out in your material you should have color copies, and in some places there are yellowed versions, and those are where we know that certain typo things have to be corrected, because at this point in time, for this example, we don't know which title will fit into that. So at some future point, it's incumbent upon staff to put that correction in. Let me see my other note. On the next page, general application processing procedure. Things like application fees. Although you don't set fees, it's important to have it in the code that the council sets fees by resolution. So it's clear to the public in reading this that that's required. Something in here that's highlighted in yellow already for you, standard city application form shall be periodically reviewed. That's one of your roles, but you can pass that on to staff, or you can pass that on to the City Council if you would so desire, and that would be a decision that you make. In the next section down, determination of completeness. In here, it lists 30 days for staff to determine an application that is complete. That's a state standard that you can't go beyond that 30 days. But you may want to have it be less. And I could go on page after page after page, all 90 pages. I have a number of things that are in here that I'm just trying to lead you gently towards being sure that you look at those sections, look at those highlight things, so that you consider whether or not you want to make, whether you agree with what's written or whether you would suggest something else. For example, in here, a big example, many pages in here, is the Historic Review Commission that's addressed in here. You may find it's inappropriate that there be a separate Historic Review Commission or committee or review process in this community. You may want to take that role on yourself. And that role only rolls over to you if the city chooses, the city council chooses to establish historic districts and have historic procedures for certain structures in town. In that same vein, there are things in here where, when I was originally writing this, we had separated master plan and a section as to what a master plan is versus what a specific plan is. In most communities, I would have recommended that you do away with the master plan aspect, because the master plan and specific plan are very similar to each other. Why it is in here now is because in your economic development corridor, it talks about, in the general plan that deals with it, it talks about those projects need a master plan. So you need to have what is a master plan and what the steps are to create one in your document, so that an applicant that has land that wants to develop it knows what it is that they have to do. So, being long-winded here, what I'm trying to do is remind you that we need to start moving forward on this. Commissioner Sobek had suggested establishing a workshop for that activity, and I think that would be a good thing. You can't have workshops during your normal commission standard meeting dates and start times, so that's not a problem. It would be a more roundtable kind of discussion situation than sitting up at the dais, and that is fairly productive when it's the commission having its discussion. Then, when you have a public hearing, that's when the public would be more involved in agreeing or disagreeing with your discussion. If you simply have everyone in the room discussing it, you'll get sidetracked on a whole bunch of things and never get through your discussion. So my suggestions to you, if you have a workshop, you allow the public to speak during public comments, but then you as a body discuss the language and any changes you like. Then, when you have the official public hearing on it for your recommendation, the public can get up and speak on individual issues. I would like to offer to you as well, although you were just given a copy of the material, since I have highlighted the items, we can give you another color copy of this so that you have before you the different things that I'm suggesting that you pay additional attention to. Okay? With that, that's the only point of having this item before you tonight, is to let you know what we're hoping you're going to be working on, or that you have been working on, and to raise the suggestion of the commissioner to set at least the first workshop and see how it goes from there, to start discussing these chapters.
Do you have a timeline which you'd like to follow over this?
At this point in time, with the other things that are going on with the council, my suggestion is the second meeting in August be the first workshop for this.
Okay, so possible workshop second week in August.
Could we,
Second meeting in August.
Understood.
could we say something to the effect that we would be discussing pages 1 through 20 at that first workshop? Can we do it in sections?
You can limit it in any fashion that you would want. My preference would be by chapter, not by page. And I think that you probably would be able to go far more than the first 20 pages, because some of these are in pretty big sized chunks. And some of them, although you may say, in other words, you may get through 50 pages because most of it is something that you can easily address, but then page 51 and 52, you take an entire study session on, or workshop on. So my suggestion is we just have this available to the public. If they want to review it, they can comment during public comments on it. You have your discussions, and you work through it page by page until you're done, and we move on to the next group.
So this section here, is this different than what we were given before? Or is this?
The only difference is I've gone through in mine and highlighted some particular things for you to look at. But it is exactly the same as what you had been given on.
In the binder?
Yes, in the binder
Yeah.
in January, yes.
I wasn't clear if you made some changes and this is new updated. Okay,
No, not to that, I've been working on subsequent material.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a quick question. These are the development code. I'm looking, we should put some reference in here to design, development standards.
They are in there. They will be in the individual chapters where you go through and have the zone that will have design standards for that zone.
For that zone, so you'll put that in later.
Yes, those
It'll
are
be
in
things
subsequent
like,
chapters.
we're looking for a 20-foot setback, we're looking
Absolutely.
for.
All the development standards will be in the individual, the development standards and the design standards for those particular zones will be in the subsequent
At a
zones.
later date, when they're-
In further chapters, correct. For example, right now, because we have people that are interested in developing on land that's in the economic development corridor, we are creating a chapter, a zone for the economic development corridor with 5 subgroups. In there, we'll have a matrix of the different subzones, the uses, whether they're permitted by right, permitted with a conditional use permit, permitted with a plot plan review, and so forth. Following that are tables that will tell you they're subject to this amount of setback, that amount of height, these amount of floor area ratios, and so on and so forth. Following that will be design standards that will address whether or not
Type of
all of them,
architecture,
right,
color
kind of review
palettes,
and what
things
kind
like
of
that.
architecture and so forth is required.
Have you seen like Temecula's? I think we may.
I've seen dozens, and I've got a template that I'm using that's a collection of different places.
Because I'm looking for more than, obviously this is important and necessary, the code version of, okay,
Mhm.
this is allowed here, this is allowed here,
Mhm.
this square footage. But I'm also looking for design guidelines so we can say, don't come to us with a pink building. Come to us with 4-sided architecture with a 20-foot setback, with a Greco-Roman theme, or whatever it's gonna be.
Mhm.
Those kind of things.
Getting into, the answer is yes and no. I suspected that these first chapters will go by relatively quickly. The further chapters where you get into things of that sort will go slower because you're making decisions on land uses and
But we will
which
be
land
getting
uses.
into that.
But you will be getting into it. There will be a point, however, where my suggestion to you is that you separate that level of design review where you're talking about architecture to a more standard citywide template, and it be guidelines, not codes.
That's what I'm,
Right.
yeah, but this will at least reference that.
Correct.
And we will come up with a guidebook that says, these are the color templates we're heading towards, this is the type of architecture,
Correct.
this is the type of amenities you need to include in this commercial, in this retail, in this whatever.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. So is that in process?
That is in process.
Wonderful. Okay,
It's a long process, but it's in process.
good. Good deal.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right.
I have a comment and a question. Start to finish for the development code, because I've thumbed through it at home, and it can be pretty tedious at times. If we're starting this, say, in August, the second meeting in August, to really get into it, when do you think we would have this done?
That's completely up to the planning commission and ultimately the city council. We have been working on, as was noted earlier in the meeting, one chapter of the code for 3 years. I suspect when I agreed to continue on with the city as interim community development director, I anticipated that we would have the vast majority of the development code in place in this calendar year. That is not happening. It's happening much slower. I still hope that with cooperation from the commission and some tolerance from the council, that we would be able to complete the development code in 1 year, so that by July 1st of next year, if we accept, if the commission accepts, if the council accepts the idea that it's not going to be a perfect document. It's not going to cover every single possibility up front, but you want to get 95% of the way there, and then with experience, refine it so that it's unique and completely special to Menifee.
The reason I bring it up is, we all know there's an election coming up in November, and there's a possibility 3 of us may not be returning. So in all fairness to the other two, the city, the staff, instead of trying to get possibly 3 new planning commissioners up to staff, up to speed, if we're gonna be starting wouldn't we wait till maybe after the election November, maybe wait till January, and then, so everyone's on it, so one commission hears the whole thing, instead of some people starting in the middle, that they could be confused and you have other projects that come up in the middle. I'm just trying
Right. There's two
to be
answers to
more
that.
efficient.
One, the council has given staff the direction that this is the highest priority and to move forward on it. So to fulfill that, I will move forward on it. Two, I believe that in the same way this commission is a reasonable body of individuals that will make sound decisions for the future of Menifee, that if for some reason you are replaced as individual commissioners, those replacement commissioners will be equally as reasonable and simply take up where the others had left off and move forward. It would be better to move on this than to delay it for another 6 months.
Where Commissioner Metalko's going, I think, can we have like checkpoints as we run through this? We get through, let's say, the director determination process. We vote on it, we call it done. That way it never comes back to another commission, and then the entire development code can proceed forward.
The way
We
that
don't leave chapters open for discussion for lengthy periods of time, unless obviously there's a contentious item like, home occupations or something like that.
and I've discussed this with the city attorney, my suggestion is that you work through some chapters, and then when you're comfortable with that, we move that as a chunk to the city council so that they can
Okay.
move on it as an ordinance.
Okay, so we're not gonna
Then,
go with the entire book.
We're
as
only
correct.
making recommendations, we're not making. final
what we're
vote,
going
right?
to do, though, is put in that ordinance that the effective date is the effective date when all chapters have been approved, so that it all goes into effect at one time. All the current ordinances are taken out and the new one replaces. So although you may have 5, 8, 10 ordinances that adopt the different chapters that will ultimately be the entire development code, at one point in time, they all take effect.
So yes, yeah.
Other comments, questions?
Well, I still want to go back to the second meeting of August. We won't have time to go through all this in a workshop. Do we want to pick, so we can concentrate and read those certain chapters? Do we want to divide it in half and thirds and go for the first 3, 4 at that first meeting?
The suggestion is that you read as far as you can, and at that workshop, you announce that, I got to page 52, or I got to page 12, so that, whoever out of the commissioners has the lowest page number, you work to that page, and then you don't go any further, so that you
Okay.
make sure that all 5 commissioners have had the chance to read up to at least that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, are there any commissioner comments tonight?
Yeah, I was just asking if anyone planning going to California League of Cities in September? Yeah, I was thinking of going to the Thursday.
The staff made an error on that. Your normal league meeting is in, I believe it's March or April, and this is more oriented towards city councils. And our budget allows you to go to one, not to both. So we
what is
apologize for that, but
I may go anyway. What's the fee on this anyway?
it's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of $500, $590.
To attend one day?
Yeah.
I believe we were notified by Lisa on that this
Oh,
week.
okay.
So we apologize with our desire to fulfill the council's direction that you have the opportunity to go to such things. But again, on the city's limited budget, we were a little overzealous and didn't quite read it through as completely as we should have.
Get my hopes up.
Perhaps we can look at the budget and see who didn't attend the spring event and allocate that money towards the commissioners who do want to go.
This is a new fiscal year, so that budget is gone.
That money's gone.
Correct.
Nice try.
Just
Alright.
make time
Try,
for
Chris.
it next year in March. when we
Well,
go.
they may deal with different issues too, I think, don't they?
They always deal with a variety of issues, but often they overlap each other
Oh.
because of educating the council and then educating the commission on the same kind of things.
Okay, under commissioners' comments, I would just like to, we kind of mentioned earlier on in the year, I kind of brought up that we look at maybe lining our meetings with the council meetings on the same night, and we thought we'd come back to that and kind of check it out again. I'd like to put that on the agenda for our next meeting to look at maybe a Wednesday night instead of a Tuesday night, to come in line with the council. And then, I presented with everyone tonight a copy of the Constitution of California in the United States, and that was compliments of our Assemblywoman Melissa Melendez.
Thank you.
Are there any other commissioner comments? Hearing none, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion?
Motion?
Second.
Sec?
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.